What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're going from zero to producer in 90 days with Ableton Live. I'm your instructor, Torbjorn. This is part 2 of our project for our first unit. So we've done 9 videos of techniques, all the introductory stuff with Ableton Live, and now we're putting all that stuff into practice and making an actual track. This project is going to be an instrumental trap style hip hop beat. I'm saying it's an instrumental beat because we're going to do everything except for actually record the vocals over it on this project. So in our last video, we basically made a sketch. What that means is that we picked a genre, a tempo, a key. We prepared all of the key instruments and samples that fit within that genre. We defined a song form, like what order everything was going to play in. And then we started writing that beat with a technique that's called reductive arrangement. Meaning that we started with the loudest or most complex part, and then we worked backwards to the quieter parts from there. Wrote all our drum patterns, our chords, bass lines, and we did an arpeggiated pluck synth lead and recorded all of that stuff to the arrange screen, and that was our sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and press play, and let's take a little listen to what we had going on from the last one. Here's like an intro section, and now we get some bass. Since we're listening to this for the first time in a couple days, I might adjust the volumes of a few things while we go. And then this is like our chorus section. You can hear that arpeggiated synth in there. And we can kind of press pause there. If you watched the last video, you remembered the thing that we talked about in song form is that a lot of what we're doing in the sketching process is just writing like 2 or maybe 3 different sections, and then we're just alternating between those sections. That's all it takes to do a sketch. Let's talk a little bit about some sketch theory. This is something that I think is really important. The gap between having great taste, which we all have, we're all fans of good music and we know what we like, but the gap between that great taste and mediocre talent can be closed by completing a large body of work. Then it's time to move on to edits. We're going to take all of this stuff that we have here in our arrange screen, and we're going to go through this list of things that I do when I edit my songs. Edits are going to make your beat sound clean. They're going to make your composition feel tight. They're going to make your beat sound unique as you develop more editing skills and kind of have some of those tricks up your sleeve that you can pull out when you know it's the right moment. So the first thing that I want to do is double check the song form, and I want to add locators. You can kind of see we're just working in these big 16-bar chunks, intro, verse, chorus, and here on our drums, because we labeled our clips, we actually get a little bit of extra hint at what those sections are called. So I'm going to click up here right above the arrange screen, and if you right click above the arrange screen, you'll get this thing that says add locator. And I'm just going to label all of that stuff, chorus and outro. You listen to these last chords at the end, they're actually going to ring out a little bit longer than the clip goes for. Still a little bit of green on the meter all the way up until like right around here. So that's something that I like to do is I like to add this extra locator at the very, very end and literally just call it end. And that way I know when I'm exporting my song later that I need to make sure that I make the selection all the way out until that point. Otherwise, we're going to have some random like sound chop off at the end of our chords, and it's going to be not that good sounding. Another thing that I like to do is double check all the scales and chords. I pulled a little bit of my Food Network move here. And if you will remember from our last video that what we did to change our second verse was I added a new different type of pad sound. But what I forgot to do was go back here and add our MIDI effects that were changing our scale and changing our pitch. And I'm actually even going to go in a little bit further because when we started writing this, I had said that I was going to make this song be in D minor. And what I did was start all of the notes on a D. And then I went and pitched them all up 2 semitones after using this C minor scale tool here. And really what I'm realizing that I should have done is I should have just written everything in C minor and then it would be in D minor. But since I wrote it in D minor and then pitched it up further, it's actually in E. So that's not the key that we want, but it is a really, really easy fix. Double click on one of your clips, Command A to select all. And you can use your arrow keys to go up a pitch, or you can use your arrow keys to go down. And so what I'm going to do, just double checking my scales, and now that I've like rested my ears and my brain and I'm coming back to this and knowing that I do want it to be in D minor, is I'm just going to fix all of those scales real quick. Luckily, doesn't take a whole lot of time because this clip is the same as the verse. So we can just Command D and you'll see that those notes went down. Same thing in the chorus, except for we shift it up an octave by selecting all of our notes. And instead of pressing up and down arrows, we hold shift and press up and down arrows. And then we get an octave change at a time. All right, moving on. This is this bass sound here, because this is a single note instrument and we're not using the scale tool and we're not using the chords or any of that weird stuff. We can actually just keep this where it is. It's really just the chord ones, the one that we threw through this C minor MIDI effect and pitch up. Those were the ones that we got to go back and double check. Make sure that those are actually playing C, so that when this pitch thing moves it back up semitones, that it is the correct key. That's some of the trouble that you can get yourself into when you're working with MIDI effects rather than working with the music theory. You may have to go back and correct some of those things. That's why we add that in the list. It may not be perfect because, again, we're using MIDI effects to kind of like hack some of the music theory knowledge and just get to the chords and get to the melodies quickly. That's okay for now. Next step is we got to smooth out the transitions. So in between every section here, there is this moment in time where we're kind of creating some expectation that we're going to move on to a new sound. Something is going to add every 8 bars or get removed every 8 bars or change every 8 bars. And the things that lead into those changes we call transitions, or sometimes we call them turnarounds. But let's listen to the end of the intro leading into the verse. So clearly 2 different sections, but the transition between them is like a little rough. So there's a few things that we can do to ease that. Creating some silence right before the end of a next section can help separate those things. So let's try and do that. We're actually going to need to split this clip up in order to just change this last bar. Because if you look at our clip here, the drum track, the intro clip, we've got these loop markers letting us know at the top and bottom of the clip when the loop starts and stops. And we can stretch it back and forth forever. And if we change one note in the pattern, like if we were to delete this first hi-hat, then it deletes that first hi-hat for every loop that follows it. So what we need to do is highlight this last section here and press Command E, and then we're going to split that into its own clip. And now any changes we make to this clip are unique to that clip. So all we are really going to do is just get rid of a couple notes at the end. Maybe even we'll put our triplet grid on here, and we'll put a little hi-hat stutter at the end. And we can change this last hi-hat to be our open hi-hat sound. Nice. Now that helps ease that transition. So I'm going to just go through and find a way that I can do that on every one of these sections. I might just get rid of everything except for the kick drum. Just leave lots of extra space there. And we're going to emphasize that some more with some more sounds in just a second, but that's a great little turnaround. I love that at the end of the verse. Bring the energy down, give it some silence, and then a big bang when the chorus comes back in. All right, let's listen to the end of the chorus. I bet at the very end of the chorus, we can just get rid of this last 808, and then we can simplify the drums here at the end a little bit. All you got to do is grab your little bracket tool here on your clip, and you can click and drag it to get rid of some of those notes. Here I am selecting the last 2 bars of the drums, Command E or Control E for Windows users to separate that clip. Let's get rid of that kick. And then we'll maybe just end it with the snare hit. Create a little bit of separation to help ease that transition. Now, verse 2, we found a trick that worked really well for verse 1, but we definitely don't want to replicate the same technique twice. We want to add that variation. So I'm thinking maybe on this second verse, instead of getting rid of a bunch of sounds, we can do a big buildup. So I'm going to separate the last couple bars of my drum clip. And I'm just going to go through here and just add a couple extra kick drums. And once we start doing this kick drum build-up thing, I'm going to start getting rid of some of our extra hi-hat sounds. Might be a little trial and error. Let's take a listen and see if we need to edit it in a different way. I think we can lose that last snare. Since we're getting rid of the hi-hats, maybe we'll do the open hi-hat at the same time as the snare. It's kind of has more of a crash cymbal quality to it, so we can use that to like end all of the cymbals on that note. Definitely builds the energy back up. And now what was really cool about the transition in the first verse is missing now. And since the chorus is typically something that repeats the same way every time we hear it, it might be cool to play with that expectation a little bit and do a thing here where we can get rid of a bunch of the drums at the beginning of the chorus. Let these synths play by themselves here for a minute. And then bring it back in with the stutter hi-hat. So I'm going to get rid of all of our kicks and snares and cymbals except for this first kick on the downbeat. And then I'm going to leave this hi-hat stutter at the end of this bar. I'm going to get rid of one, and I'm going to move the other 808 on the snare. I'm not sure how that's going to sound, but let's take a listen and see if we like it. That totally did what I was hoping it would do, which is really cool. So they get the kick and they get the 808. I can imagine we're going to add a crash cymbal or some type of effect sound that happens there in a little bit. But it's this big buildup and everyone thinks like, oh, it's going to get so loud. And we kind of like play with the expectation a little bit by not making it very loud until a couple beats later, then it does get loud. Let's scroll over to the end of the chorus. Take a listen to what we can do with this transition. I think maybe in the last 4 bars here, we can just slowly but surely thin out some of the extra cymbal sounds. So like these hi-hats that are showing up on our off beats, we can definitely get rid of those. Some of the extra kick drums. I basically want to use these 4 bars to split the difference between what comes before it and what's coming after it. And if you listen to the outro, we've just got a couple hi-hats and a couple snare drum hits. So we have to really be strategic about what extra notes we can get rid of here so that we're getting close to that similar energy. I think probably these hi-hat stutters can go. And I kind of like how that works in that way. It's definitely, these 2 bars here are definitely less complex than the bars that came before, and then a little bit less complex in these 2 bars, and then we're easing into that outro. Any sounds that needed to be faded in or faded out, we're pretty much working with all MIDI instruments here, so there's not a whole lot of fading in or out like you might need to with samples, but we kind of did that when we put our samples into our drum rack. This hi-hat, for example, I shortened it and used the fade out tool on the sample. So that's something that you can do like in your drum rack or in your simpler instrument if you're using MIDI sounds rather than audio clips. Moving on to the next thing here. Beat drops, we kind of did some of these already. Beat drops is where certain sounds stop playing and we get emphasis on like 1 or 2 elements instead of having the whole track. This is really cool, especially for a vocalist, because it gives you an opportunity to have a really poignant lyric be the only sound that's playing in the song at a certain time. So we can do this in both of the verses. We can do some really short ones. I'm going to get rid of this part of the clip that has the kick and the snare on it, and I'm going to separate this 1 note of our bass. And I'm just going to peel that note back so that it comes in with the second kick drum in the loop. We can do the same thing with this chord. Select that, Command E. We'll peel those notes back a little bit. I think that's everything that's playing in that section. So let's take a listen. I'll back it up a little bit and play this verse so that you can hear what happens with a beat drop. So that was a really short one. Let's go over here to the second verse and we'll do an even longer one this time. Let's try one that's a whole bar long. So I'm just going to delete everything in the drums in bar 57, separate our bass clip so that we can make that one unique. Peel that note back there. Same thing here with our synth. Let's take a listen to that. Stutter effects. This is an interesting one. We kind of did a stutter effect here with our kick drum building up into this second chorus. All we're doing is we're just taking a sound, we're playing it for a certain amount of time, repeating that, and then after it repeats, then we're decreasing the amount of space between the next note, repeating that a few times, decreasing the amount of space even more, and then repeating that a few times. So we could even do that with the snare drum. In a sort of like different pattern than the kick drum, like that. So we've got a few offbeat notes. It's happening a little bit slower than the increase of the kick drum, but it is increasing at the same points, and then they get to be the same speed on the very, very last few notes. Maybe we'll just have it go fast the whole time. So that's an example of a stutter edit. You're basically just selecting something and using the Command D or duplicate function. This is great with MIDI notes, but it works with audio clips as well. Last thing that we're going to do here is we're going to add some effects samples. I'm just going to add a couple audio tracks down here at the bottom. So what I mean when I'm saying effects samples is things that are used to just like help drive a sound. Things like cymbal hits or reverse cymbal hits, impact sounds like a big like explosion sound or something like that has a long like reverberated sound that follows it. Risers are like white noise or some type of synth sound that are going up in pitch or going up in intensity. I'm going to go through my samples here and find a few things. I've got a whole folder filled with effects, and I'm just going to start searching for stuff. But you can use drum hits and you can use cymbals as well. Looking for one that's kind of not too intense, that has sort of a swooshy cymbal-esque sound to it. That's way more like what I'm looking for. So I'm going to drag this here at the end of the verse. I'm going to turn this track way, way, way down because risers can be so overbearing, so overpowering. And I'm going to line this thing up with right where our kick drum hits. Got to zoom in here and just get it right perfectly in place. And then this will help emphasize this drop that we have here. Awesome. It kind of took away from our beat drop here, so I'm actually going to drag this back, and I'm going to use our audio fade-in tool. Just grab this little square and drag it over. And I'm going to drag it over pretty far because I don't think it needs to be very loud until the very, very end. All right, next thing we need to do is definitely get a crash cymbal in there. So let's go to our drums category, cymbal. Definitely love those trappy sounding ones. We'll turn this one down as well. Effect sounds and cymbal crash hits and ride hits don't necessarily need to be very loud for them to be impactful. Just helps, gives it that extra like boom right when it comes in. We can actually, now that we've got this crash cymbal here, we can just kind of borrow this over on the other chorus. Let's go down here to our ride category. Kind of like that one. I like to use rides in the same way that I use crashes, but for sections that are not necessarily as loud. So it's still that little bit of extra like energy that lets you know that a new section is starting, but we just don't need it to be that big crash like a crash cymbal is. And with rides, a lot of times I like to just add some extra reverb. Maybe a little echo delay. Cool. Let's do an impact sound if we can find one as well. I'll search within the Ableton samples, but I may have to dig into my own crate. That one's actually pretty cool. Perk Impact Metal. I'm not sure what pack that comes from, but let's use these impact sounds to get out of our beat drops in our verses. Excellent. Another thing that I like to do is reverse crashes. So I'm just going to go back to my drums and grab one more crash cymbal. I'm always looking for the word crash, but I forget that Ableton just says cymbal instead of crash. That one's really good. I don't know yet where we're going to put that one, but I'm going to grab it for now, and I'll just turn it off just because I like the sound of it. That's pretty good, actually. Was looking for a reverse cymbal and found one. This one's really cool. I'll put this on its own track here. If we zoom in, you can see it's like a big reverse sound, and then it's got the reverb space built into it. So it's perfect for those beat drops. And that's exactly where I'm going to use it. Right when we get to a section where our beat drops out, that's where I want to line up that empty space with. I like to zoom right in and get it just perfect, but just use your ear and find out what works best for you. We can turn that one down a little bit as well. Definitely don't need that to be so loud. I'll grab that and drop it in our first verse. Back it up right on that beat drop. And let's take a listen to the whole thing. This is pretty much all of the edits and all of the stuff that I wanted to add on this session. So let's make sure that we're happy with all of the stuff that we did here with our edits. All right, definitely like all of those edits and all the placement of those effects. I relabeled a few things while we were listening and moved this crash swell sound effect. I think it might sound good in the intro and in that drop in our chorus, so I just want to take one quick listen to those, make sure that they sound good. Turn that one down a little bit, and I think we can steal that riser. I think that will sound good over here as well because we've got that big buildup. Just make sure that that lines up with where we want it to be. I think this one can be a little bit shorter, so we'll drag it back, double check our fade. I'm not feeling this cymbal swell there. I'm just going to delete it. We'll double back and listen to the one that I moved in the intro and see if that sounds good. Maybe not there. Maybe leading into the verse sounds a little better. I think that's probably the move. Awesome. That's all our edits. We're going to go ahead and just save, Command-S, Control-S. If you're on Mac or Windows, we're going to use the loop bar up here at the top with our bracket tool on the left and the right to make sure that we're selecting exactly the part of the beat that we want. So we'll zoom in here and just make sure that that goes right with that end location marker that we added earlier. And then the left side, we can just drag all the way out to the very beginning. Click on the center of it. That's the fastest way to select your entire beat. And then Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R will pull up the export menu. Since this is still just a demo version of this song, I'm not going to encode a wave because they're larger files. I'm going to encode it just to MP3 to keep that file size low, and because it's okay if we lose a little bit of quality on the demo version of it. Go to our desktop here. Trap beat project, and we'll call this trap beat project. In parentheses, we'll call this edit 1 because this is the first edit stage. We'll press save. Let Ableton do its thing here and write the file, and then we get to call it a day. Big thanks everybody for watching this video. Big thanks to Ableton trial version extended to 90 days. Ableton Live Suite. In our next video, we're going to get into more ways that we can expand our sound design, a little bit of automation, use of audio effects, and more. So I'll see you in the next video. And until then, happy producing. Peace out. Have fun. Make lots of music.